So, welcome everyone. Project Hindsight Labs. This is a special session with me, Michael Weatherburn, and Historians Without Borders, Heta Hedman, the Secretary General of the organization, and Erkki Tuomioja, who is the chair of the organization in Finland. Welcome both. Now let's get straight on to it. We have Erkki is a former foreign minister of Finland and an MP for many years, author of many books, and he's kindly prepared a short introduction to tell us about this exciting initiative. So over to you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to tell you about Historians Without Borders and our aims and work. We are a Finnish NGO which was established in 2015, and we have several hundred members who are mostly historians, but also include diplomats, media workers, and others interested in and working with conflict resolution issues. And we also act as the secretariat for the International Network of Historians Without Borders, which was founded at our international conference on the use and abuse of history, arranged at the University of Helsinki in 2016. And we also published a book on the subject in 2016. It's been now sold out, but it's part of our work is also publications. The impetus for taking the initiative for creating HWB was our recollection of the countless occasions when I, myself both as a foreign minister and as a historian, had encountered the situations where history, and sometimes even very ancient history, such as biblical tales or the Battle of Kosovo-Polia in 1389, was misused to foster current conflicts and hamper efforts at conflict resolution. Unfortunately, historians are not completely innocent of this kind of misuse, but mostly it is politicians and the media who are the worst offenders. So our aim is to bring together those professional historians who oppose this kind of misuse of their work and support the use of historical research and dialogue in conflict prevention and mediation. So we are not directly engaged in research ourselves, but we support bringing together historians in cross-border research projects and dialogue, particularly in situations where history is being misused. But we also are working for open access to historical archives everywhere. It is part of our work. At our international conference in Helsinki, we had several workshops where we brought together historians from inter alia, Israel and Palestine, Turkey and Armenia, Finland and Russia, etc. And we have also arranged 2 meetings in Finland between Ukrainian and Russian historians before the Russian attack against Ukraine in 2022. And although the participants did not agree on much, they all agreed that they wanted us to continue facilitating this kind of dialogue. Obviously, this is not now possible while the war continues, but both sides have indicated that we should continue to do so once it becomes possible again. And it is important to recognize that peace processes can be aborted and fail unless the history of the conflict is also openly and honestly addressed between the parties to the conflict. And this can start by bringing together historians from the parties to sit together and as a first step to listen to each other's historical narratives. The parties may disagree with and challenge these narratives, but listening to your former opponent is the first step to putting the past behind you and for reaching any common understanding of history. And in addition to many smaller events, we have also arranged an international conference in Sweden, bringing together Nordic and Belarusian historians, which is sadly another case which cannot be repeated today and can be done only with exiled historians from Belarus. But we are also engaged with a project to bring together historians from the growing community of Russian diaspora in Europe. And our long-term ambition is to promote the kind of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, the German word providing the example. They have provided the best example of how to deal honestly and openly with your own awful 20th century history. In South Africa, we had a seminar on writing colonial history with the aim of bringing together historians from both the former colonial powers and former colonies, between whom there has been too little interaction in writing colonial history. There is an increasing need for critically assessing the way in which colonial history is taught in European schools, given the fact that a growing proportion of pupils in our schools are from immigrant families originating from many of the former European colonies. And here the Germans also, notwithstanding the praise they deserve for their Vergangenheitsbewältigung, were late in dealing with their own colonial history in today's Namibia and elsewhere. And one way of dealing with difficult history of conflicts is setting up truth and reconciliation commissions. We have prepared a report where we studied the successful and sometimes less successful of examples of these kind of commissions. And there is one now working also in Finland dealing with how the indigenous Sami people have been treated in the past. So we are a very small organization with limited financial resources, but our worldwide contacts give us the possibility of mobilizing historians for enhancing efforts at conflict resolution and peace mediation. So I have myself had meetings with historians in up to 30 countries in Europe, Asia, Africa, the US, and the response to our initiative has always been very positive. And whenever we approach historians to ask if they can become a part of a project, they are almost always willing and ready to do so. So this is just a brief outline of the background for our initiative. Perhaps I should mention that at the conference we had in Helsinki 2016, the main speakers were, the keynote speakers were Martti Ahtisaari, our former president and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, Bernard Kouchner of Médecins Sans Frontières, which is an example of the kind of cross-border cooperation which professionally we are aiming to foster. And also Margaret Macmillan, perhaps the most well-known historian, Canadian, British historian. So we're open to discussing and answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Erkki. That was an extremely comprehensive insight in a very short space of time. Well done. And also just congratulations on the ambitions and confidence and so goals you have in doing this, because, you know, so you've selected, so as I said to Heta when we first met, you've selected some of the most challenging geopolitical areas in the entire world and stepping into them to try and build on, I think, a Finnish tradition of NGOs, of being a mediator. It seems to fit into that, and I wish you all the best with it. And ideally, everyone on every side should want to reconcile and come with positive solutions. I wonder, Heta, could you also do activities within Finland? I'm on your mailing list. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about those and your success stories there, please.
Yes, thank you. And thank you also on my behalf for organizing this session. So my name is Heta Hedman and I act as Secretary General of Historians Without Borders in Finland. So as Erkki mentioned, the Finnish NGO was formed in 2015 and the international network the year thereafter in 2016 at the International Conference on the use and abuse of history, which was held here in Finland. So really the initiative is a Finnish one, and I have been with the organization now soon for 2 years. So Erkki, of course, knows better the whole history of the organization, but I would say in general, one of our most important tasks, which we do here in Finland, is according to the declaration, which guides the work of Historians Without Borders, is to deepen general and comprehensive knowledge about history and the use of history. So as historians, we of course know that tendencies, different historiographies in academic historical research, they of course, as any science, constantly reinvent itself. There are new interpretations and so forth. So one of our tasks is to then transmit this new scientific knowledge together with universities to the wider public. So what we do is we organize regularly different kinds of events. most often here in Helsinki, where we are based, but also in other cities, which are open to the general public. We try to communicate about history and kind of topical matters within historiography in a broad, understandable manner, which is not directed per se. I mean, it can be also directed to the academic community, but also to a larger audience. And this is one of our top priorities, how we operate in Finland. And also we have had some other projects. For example, Erkki mentioned the topic of colonialism. We have an active working group on colonialism, which consists of historians and other professionals who deal in their work somehow with colonialism. And we also there organize different kinds of events. In the last year, we've adopted this new event type where we, together with one of the oldest cinemas in Helsinki, Cinema Orion, we're regularly hosting movie screenings and discussion events, and they have been extremely popular. So we try to find new, more innovative ways of kind of transmitting this new information, which is being produced constantly in universities. And then every now and then we're trying to develop new projects in which we could somehow kind of advance the general spirit of the Declaration of Historians Without Borders, which, by the way, you can find on our website, hwb.fi, Historians Without Borders.
Thank you. That's again an extremely comprehensive insight. Thank you so much. And having seen some of your exhibits in museums and so on, it is, just to inform everyone who's watching, they really do get into really deep intellectual interpretations of museums, local history, international history, colonialism within the country as well, because of course Finland is on the border of Sweden and Russia, both former colonial powers, and also the indigenous Sami people in the north. I was just anticipating your upcoming work. What kind? I mean, we have many elections. It's the year of democracy. We're told the highest number of voters ever voting this year. What kind of issues do you think might be coming up that you're anticipating and seeking to engage with? Either of you, please.
Well, I would say that in every ongoing conflict and in every potential conflict, history continues to play a role. So while we are dealing with ongoing conflicts and trying to bring historians from both parties, all parties together to discuss and remove the use of history as a conflict tool.
Sorry.
But we also need to try to prevent conflicts, and therefore even when there is no ongoing conflict, we should try and engage historians to remove the potential of history being misused to create conflicts. And we are seeing this in almost every conflict. Of course, the Ukrainian conflict is the war in Ukraine is a good example, but so is the Middle East, which is full of this historical misuse of to foster conflicts and to justify what is being done for the use of force and so forth. And you will find this almost everywhere. We had, for example, just to mention an example, we also had an international internet conference discussion on the Colombian peace process, which again is also one where we had a history playing part, where we had Ian Gilmore who was the EU representative for the Colombian peace process as one of the speakers. So there is no lack of issues which we will try to deal with, but our problem is, of course, the lack of financial resources. As I would say, we have the intellectual resources, we can easily mobilize them because people recognize the importance of this kind of work. But we are as a small organization, we are very much a shoestring operation. We get a small grant from the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Finland, but it does not cover all of our expenses. And mostly we finance ourselves from Finnish private foundations who have financed our projects. And there is one project which is not yet public, but which we hope that I already referred to in my introduction, and that is trying to bring together Russian historians in diaspora with historians particularly from the Nordic countries, but from the Europe at large, and to facilitate the possibility of starting sometime in the future the kind of Vergangenheitsbewältigung process in Russia itself. I mean, if Germany is the best example of how they have dealt with their own awful history, Russia is perhaps the worst example, but nobody is perfect. So we have everybody has to learn from each other.
Might I add another example of our project this year? So Finland will chair the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, next year in 2025. And currently we are engaged in a project called OCE by All, in which we are trying to bring the knowledge, or the historical knowledge which we have from the OSCE and as you perhaps know, the Helsinki spirit, and all of these processes into debates on where the OSCE might be headed into the future, and also try to bring perspective from the civil society as well. So this is an ongoing thing and something that we'll probably deal with next year as well.
Thank you. And related, before we get on to the audience questions, you mentioned different kind of historiographies, Heta. I mean, what I've noticed in my own work is, when I started, even, 20 years ago now, I guess, it was still books, journals, very slow projects, very, conferences, big bureaucratic. Whereas now, these things are still ongoing, but then you also have this chaos of the information warfare, where the history is deployed on a minute-by-minute basis, and we're not in a way we can peer review sort of to death, as it were. It's just complete. It's out of control. So, is there any way you can see of grappling with this in a way that brothers and sisters of mine, academia, are doing so?
Well, that actually presents a huge challenge because the social media and internet are wonderful for distributing information, but they are also very much in use for distributing disinformation and direct falsehoods. So our resources are not up to the scale that we could answer this, but in dealing with specific issues, we have to take this into account and try to work against this spreading of even blatant lies or misinformation.
Yes, and I could also add that yes, as Erkki said, it's a great challenge, and we can try to do one part in this big mission. One concrete thing I can think of is that currently we're in the process of applying funding for two different kinds of projects. One to create a podcast series about newer historical research about the history of colonialism, to try to make it in a more accessible format to a larger audience. And then another one is to create some kind of guidelines how to deal, or guidelines or a kind of a booklet on how to deal with different interpretations or narratives surrounding history, or especially near history in situations, in pedagogical situations, for example, in schools or in museums and so forth. So to try to bring this element of dialogue, because I think one aspect which is really important to understand is that you need to be aware that there are different interpretations that people have about history, different kinds of narratives, and this is, of course, in a multipolar society, it's just natural, this is how it is. But of course, you have to be able to kind of have a dialogue and to be able to discuss with these differing views, and then recognize when someone might be using historical narratives to foster some kind of conflicts. So there are many situations, not all of them are bad, but of course, if there are situations in which someone is trying to somehow manipulate historical narratives, then we should be somehow prepared to recognize it and to somehow combat it.
I think we should be very careful about using the concept of historical truth. I always use it in quotation marks, but facts are another thing, and they are things that can be checked and can be. Then you may have different interpretations of these facts, but we are living in a world today where even facts are mere opinions. And that is something which we will have to try to counter.
Thank you. Again, excellent answers. Thank you. Let's turn over to the audience. We've got quite experienced people in history, international politics, government, and various areas. Let's see if we have any points from anybody online. If you want to raise your little digital hand, please. We have one in the chat box, which I should just read out to everybody. Fascinating work. Can you elaborate in more detail on strategies you use when there are differing interpretations?
Well, I think the strategy begins that you have to bring these people with different interpretations together and to listen to each other's narratives. And you can of course disagree with that narrative, but you have to recognize it first, and that is something I think that is the first step in any process of trying to remove the misuse of history, abuse of history, and trying to reach any kind of common understanding. So there are no shortcuts, but I think that this is something that you have to start with, because there is a school of thought which says that you should best to leave history, as I put it, aside and sweep it under the carpet. But if you do so, it may return at any stage as a zombie to haunt you and even derail any ongoing peace processes unless you deal with these different interpretations and views openly and honestly.
Thank you, Erkki. We have now a question from Jill Bennett, who is the former official historian of the Foreign Office in the UK and also associated with many sections of the civil service. Thank you for joining us, Jill. Over to you.
Well, thank you, both of you, for that very interesting presentation. Obviously, as Michael said, I've spent all my career working as a historian in government, so I've spent a lot of time combating the misuse of history, usually by government ministers. But what I wanted to ask you, I mean, I know you mentioned you had a small grant from the Foreign Ministry, but in general, to what extent do you interact with governments, your own and others, in this in the work of HWB? Thank you.
Well, mostly, or actually exclusively, we have interacted with our own government, with our Ministry for Foreign Affairs. As I said, we get a small grant from them, but more significant has been that we have used the facilities of our embassies who have hosted meetings of historians in many countries, in dozens of countries. So that is the kind of cooperation that we have had with them. But from the very beginning, we were keen to reassure everyone that we are independent of all governments, including our own. So we would not hesitate to criticize our own government if there was any need to do so, irrespective of if that would mean an end to a financing. Well, we have a difficult situation in Finland today, not concerning Historians Without Borders, but with many other organizations who have seen actually quite drastic cuts in their government funding.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So we've got two related questions actually that relate to Jill's just now as well. So one is how did you build your international network and how do you maintain it? And the next question, which is quite similar, how do you come to the attention of those who may need or ought to know about your work? Essentially, how do you draw people into this wonderful process? Well,
first of all, about the network, actually we would want to make this ourselves into an international organization, but to do so you have to have at least a dozen or so branches in other countries, and we have had discussions with historians in many places. Only a month ago in Cambridge, for example, in the UK, but also with Sweden and in Estonia, and we have tried to encourage them to have set up their own organization of Historians Without Borders in that country. And once we have enough of these to create a credible international organization, we will do so. But so far we are a network, which means that any historian or those people working with historical issues can join the network by accessing our website reading our declaration and signing on to the declaration. It involves no other obligations or fees, and you are put on our mailing list, and you will receive then all our information about our events, which we have not only in Finland but also elsewhere. We have had meetings and public discussions in many other countries as well. But this is a lack, and we have also actually approached quite a few international foundations for financing. We have a project for our second international conference. We have already a promise from the University of Vienna that they are ready to host this event, but we have not yet found the funding for this. And the problem is that as we are a Finnish NGO, even many other international funds who are sympathetic to our work perhaps do not see it make it possible for funding a Finnish organization. We should have an international organization. So we are working on that, but that is a huge challenge. And Heta can continue.
Yes, thank you, Erkki. Yes, I think that was very well summarized. I might also add that if you're interested in our work, and of course, if you are interested in establishing your own Historians Without Borders chapter in your own country, you're very welcome to do so, and we can give the support that you need for that. And of course, if you would like us to visit you either in person or through a Zoom or Teams, we are very happy to do that. Of course, as Erkki mentioned, we have very limited financial resources, but hopefully we could be able to organize something. And as Erkki also mentioned, the Finnish embassies around the world have been very polite in helping us to organize various meetings with historians in their facilities.
Thank you. I don't think anyone's got a particular question here. I'll come back. There's one in the chat I'll come back to in a minute. But to go into a kind of history squared mode, both of you are very historically minded people, and especially Erkki with extensive, career in working in the foreign environment, foreign office environment. Do you see yourselves as continuing some historical initiative? Do you draw inspiration from previous efforts in some kind of respect like this, or as far as you're concerned, is what you're doing entirely new? Thank you.
Well, I don't think that we have not yet found another organization which has the more or less the same aims as we do. But there are many, huge number of organizations that we are cooperating with, such as the European Network for Reconciliation and Solidarity, the Eurocleo organization of history teachers in Europe, and many others. So we are not a consultancy, but we are ready to consult anyone who wants us to discuss issues with us on this, dealing with how to deal with history. And we have also had quite a lot. We had presentations with the UN headquarters, with UN people, with the OSCE people in Vienna, and with the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. And we are also hoping, we have several projects online that we would be working with the European Union and hopefully get funding for some of our projects from the European Union. It's a rather bureaucratic effort, but if you get your foot in, I think it will be very useful.
Thank you, Erkki. Does anyone have any final remarks they would like to make? Final questions?
I think there was one again by Mr. Page.
We've answered that one, Luca.
Okay.
Thank you. And who says thank you very much in Finnish. So let me think, are there any final points to do? I guess what we can all do is help to spread the word, which is part of the purpose of this interview, I guess. And also to other disciplines, because your work relates so much both to history, international relations, defense studies, national elections, and so on. Do you have any final remarks you want to make? Thank you.
Well, first of all, again, thank you for this opportunity. And you can easily learn more about our work, our concrete projects and events and so on from accessing our website, where we will find the information not only in Finnish and Swedish, but also in English. And we will be happy to answer any questions you may have through email or any other items. And as I said, we are ready with our limited resources to help those who want to further this kind of work. So this is, I hope that also some of you may want to join the network. So please do so by accessing our website.
Yes, and you can also follow us on social media, Historians Without Borders. You will find us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And I could also add that, as I mentioned, we regularly host different kinds of events. And the next one, which will also be streamed and recorded, is on Thursday next week, which is about intersectionality and historical research. What does it mean to apply an intersectional approach to historical research? So this is what we will be discussing next week. I look forward to seeing you there, perhaps online.
And then you can access it in English.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. So as everything finished, it was comprehensive, punctual, and done in 3 languages. So thank you so much for really interesting conversation. I'm sure everyone got a lot out of it, and I'm sure people watching this at home later on will also do so and stay in touch with Historians Without Borders and your wonderful work. So kiitos paljon, thank you, and bye for now.
Thank you. Kiitos paljon. Goodbye.